that a lot of the questions that I get have maybe a tinge towards like, hey, what about cybersecurity? Or what about quality fade? Or what about, maintaining logistics? Because I need to get this part, to your point, Mike, just in time. I need this to arrive landed on this date in order to keep the supply chain functionally running. And what I always say to them is those are really important capacities that you should also be monitoring, right? No one's going to talk on a supply chain basis. No one's going to stop you and say those are not important, right? But at the same time, what I say is it's always about trying to find leading indicators that can tell you about those problems maybe a couple months or even maybe a year ahead of where you start to see the impact to your supply chain. So things like cybersecurity with breaches, things like, logistics, things like quality fade. Well, it makes total sense. At the point where you hit financial distress, you're not going to be investing capital or anything else towards those avenues, right? You're not going to be investing in your cybersecurity provisioning unless your board is saying adamantly you're going to continue to do it. You're not going to keep your quality assurance team and your inspectors going on the line to make sure that everything that comes off of it is up to snuff. You're going to start to see spec fall. The same thing with logistics. You start to find, lower cost options being used. You start to see slippage. You start to see demurred fees, things like that. So all of those components can be somewhat, tracked from a canary in the coal mine perspective if you're monitoring the financial risk signals. Because if you see that, that's where you can start having conversations with the supplier, start to figure out what's going on. How can you, as a critical buyer, potentially mitigate some of those issues before they put a hole in your supply chain? So I know you guys have some great examples for this, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear because this applies to even things like CapEx, maintenance CapEx, expansionary CapEx. Like, we can talk about demand as much as you want. Knowing your own demand is really important, but if your supply chain can't keep up with that, it doesn't matter that you have capacity, right? So I don't know if Mike or Alvin, you have anything you want to throw onto that one.
Yeah, I can add to that because actually, Mike, you and I have had these conversations. Yeah. You mentioned CapEx. When I look at supply chain, you have your risk of disruption, and then you have your financial risk. Think about CapEx. You're going to build a machine, construct something. Sometimes you pay up to 90% of that value up front before you even have that machine installed in your facility, right? And I've had examples where we front people money, and then they disappear. And, if you would have vetted them just from a credit perspective, you would have identified, hey, this is not a real location. This is an empty field. I mean, we see that on the customer side all the time, right? You'd be surprised how many times you see it on the supplier side too, especially when you're fronting out money and it just disappears. So, going back to what you said, Mike, also about, understanding, is it a single source? Is it a large supplier? It's not just the large ones. Going back on the other example, Mike, I use a Toyota example, right? You build these cars, you're focusing on the suppliers of the major components, transmissions, engines, suspensions. But what about the little buttons? You can't sell a car without the little knobs, right? And those are pennies, right? Well, not pennies, but a few bucks, compared to a very large ticket item. So you need to understand where your risk is. And you need to basically focus on where your risk is. Is it a large vendor? Is it a critical vendor? Is it a sole source, single source? Do they have a proprietary process? That's where you focus on. That's who you look at. And then, Mike, we've leveraged you folks. It's a big world out there. We might not revisit this vendor for 12 months, 18 months. We need the monitoring in the middle. We do it on the customer side, right? We get a flag, a red report. Hey, these guys, their payment trend just deteriorated. What do? You look at them and you see if you're going to adjust the credit line. Same fashion, we're not going to wait for the next credit report. We're going to see what happened. Hey, why did the first drop to 3, right? Something happened, and it might have not been driven by the latest quarterly. It might have been driven by something else, right? And that's basically where you need to focus from a risk perspective.